My childhood friend has started thinking I'm a clingy, insecure stutterer. I got into her school after repeating a year, but she's rather annoyed, keeping her distance from me. What she doesn't know is that I'm not there for her. Later on, I overcame my stuttering. During a speech as the freshman representative, when I sincerely expressed gratitude to the girl I was most thankful for, my childhood friend was shocked and stood up, but someone else held her down. Her roommate smiled brightly. "Step aside, you're in the way of my little brother bringing me flowers." On the day we filled out college applications, Kathy, who hadn't talked to me in ages, texted me first. "Which school did you apply to?" "B University." That's where she was at. Kathy went silent, then replied after a while, "Why did you choose B University?" "Never mind. I'll come to pick you up on the first day of school. I'll send you some money, buy some formal clothes. Don't show up looking shabby, you don't want your new friends disliking you." I was taken aback, a painful tingling in my pride. She also said, "And don't bother me every day like before." She sent me a voice message, sounding calm yet resigned. "Evan, I know you're lacking love, but you need to learn to stand on your own. Stop seeing me as your savior. Okay?" My mom was lying next to me. She can't read, but she made me send a lot of thank you messages to Kathy. She happily said it was good to have a friend from back home with me at college so I wouldn't be bullied anymore. She raised her hand and gently touched the scar running from my earlobe to the back of my head. "If anything happens, speak up. I can't always be there with you, but Kathy can. She's always protected you. It puts me at ease." I didn't let my mom hear Kathy's voice message. I held my phone tight, feeling a bit defeated. On the glowing screen, I sent my last reply. "All right, I won't bother you anymore." My mom named me Evan, hoping I'd be knowledgeable, broad-minded, and tolerant. Sadly, I let her down. I was naturally introverted and stuttered when I spoke. In conversations, I could always sense others' awkwardness. It's hard to fix. Since elementary school, I avoided speaking, didn't make friends, and didn't answer teachers' questions. Everyone said, "Don't be so antisocial, it's not likable." Except Kathy. "If you don't feel like talking, then don't." She shielded me from bullies, fighting back against a chubby bully, while I applied herbal ointment on her bruised temples. After that, Kathy often took me to play and made me call her sister. Saying one syllable is easy, right? Her fair face was bruised but full of joy. From then on, calling her sister, like mom, gave me a sense of warmth and protection. But later, Kathy, who moved from the village to live in the city, slowly changed. I sent her many messages about village life and school happenings. First, she'd reply, but then she got tired of it. One late, dark night in senior year, I was in an alley with a wound from my earlobe to the back of my head, blood seeping into my uniform collar. I texted her, hands trembling, "Kathy, there's something I want to tell you." She quickly replied, "Evan, I don't have time for your trivial stories. We're nearing finals. Study hard. Okay? That's it. I'm switching off. Don't contact me." I watched my phone screen go dark, and a light in my heart seemed to extinguish too. After the finals, Kathy asked which school I applied to. I said I was repeating a year. She paused for a long time and only said, "Oh, you lack focus, that will affect your grades, Evan. Keep your head straight in the future." On registration day, carrying heavy bags made me sweat as I looked around the train station for Kathy, but couldn't find her. She replied saying she was busy and forgot, and told me to wait. After half an hour, I finally saw two tall girls walking towards me. For a moment, I was stunned. Kathy's mom remarried a rich man and took her from the village when we were in junior high. It's been 4 years since then. Kathy's childhood traces had vanished, and she turned heads now. Nervously again, I whispered, "Sis, Evan, what were you thinking, picking such an ugly shirt color?" Kathy's first words made me a little lost. I wanted to say, "Mom picked it, she likes it, and I like it too." But I stuttered again. Before I could finish, Kathy sighed, "I understand. If speaking's tough, just say less. This is my roommate, you can hand over your luggage to her." Kathy's roommate came strolling by, pulling off her mask. A long hand took my bags. I looked into a pair of familiar eyes with a hint of mischief. "Hi, welcome to B University. I stood there dazed. The world is small. Fate is unpredictable. Betty, my desk mate before I repeated, was Kathy's roommate. Honestly, I hadn't recognized her with the mask on. Such a big change. Once rebellious and bold, with white and red dyed hair, she had lost her edge a bit. Very unique. I could still recall her sitting alongside, lazily twirling a pen during lectures. And I'll never forget when she pulled me out of an alley, the night breeze carrying the scent of pear blossoms. What's wrong? Betty seemed amused. Kathy walked too fast, so I kept pace with Betty instead. She hummed a tune, then suddenly turned to chat with me. So the sister you wrote about in all those high school essays is Kathy. I nodded slightly, avoiding her knowing look. Betty once curiously asked when I was quietly working on problems, "Do you like your sister?" Like, more like admiration. She was popular, smart, and was once kind to me, though she stopped caring about the small tree she planted back home or the shop we visited in junior high. I regretted the distance growing between us. Every now and then, she'd abruptly text me, "Seen the latest movie? The lead's amazing. My stepdad gave me plenty of spending money. Want some bubble tea? I'll order." I think she's reminding me that I haven't been forgotten. But Kathy, back here there are no theaters or cafes. Not even delivery. I'm an outdated friend from your past village life. Need my help to win her over? Startled, I met Betty's eyes. She looked earnest. Seeing me shake my head frantically, she laughed. "Just kidding. I'm not that free." She's still the carefree school rebel. An enigma. After checking in and settling into my dorm, I got a text from my mom. "Arrived at school. Remember to thank Kathy. Did she get the canned food I made? She loved it as a kid." The canned food sat right beside me. Kathy left in such a hurry that by the time I pulled the can out, she had already dragged Betty away. I stayed quiet for a while and replied to Mom, "I'll deliver it later." When I mentioned that Betty was Kathy's roommate, my mom got so worked up she called me. "Evan, you remember what I said, right? Stay away from those kind of sketchy people." I fumbled to explain, "No, Mom, she's really nice. You forgot how she got you in trouble before. Just thinking about it makes me cry. Those heartless—" "Mom!" I couldn't hold back and interrupted her loudly. "It wasn't her fault. She saved me. I've explained this a million times. But my mom stubbornly believed that because I'd been friends with Betty back then, that's why those bullies targeted me, leading to a concussion and failing my college entrance exam. No, Mom, they just picked on me. Someone with no protection. A little mute boy from a widow's house. Poor and shy. They laughed, their faces a twisted blur. I had my eyes blacked out, crying, 'Mom,' and they laughed even harder, asking why not visit his place and mess with his mom too. To this day, I can't forget that moment of losing all hope. My mom wasn't some superhero. She worried about daily expenses, ran around paying off debts, cried over my dad who died in a car accident. Me being bullied only added more weight on her shoulders. The night was dark, pear blossoms white as snow. Remember Farewell, My Concubine? There's that scene where they burn the protagonist's lips with a pipe. You all remember that? A guy in the crowd with a cigarette had a creepy smile. What if we burn his lips too? Think it'll fix his stutter. The first cigarette went on my tongue. The second went out in Betty's palm. That's all I vaguely remember. Her earrings shimmered in the moonlight. Look, the pear blossoms fell. She's here. I used to hang out with him a bit as a kid. He was always following me, even now. He scored decent, to be honest. While B University isn't bad, it's definitely not his best choice. Who knows what he was thinking? He's fine, I know what's on his mind. Low self-esteem, craving love, puts me on a pedestal, but I'm not into clingy types, kinda annoying. Kathy was on the phone with someone. I stopped, holding Mom's can, quietly listening in the stairwell. I suddenly remembered when Kathy transferred in middle school and seriously told me, we should keep in touch. Our bond of 7 years is precious. During those years from middle to high school, girls grow the fastest. But their thoughts can change overnight. You want to meet him? Not impossible, but he's got a bit of a condition. Not in his head, it's his speech. He's got a stutter, can't talk. The sunset fell, and my shadow trembled slightly. That's when Kathy saw me. I stood in the shadow looking at her. She hung up, awkward. When did you get here? My mom sent me. Thanks. I handed her the can and turned to leave. But suddenly, she grabbed me. Kathy dropped her voice. I talk casually with my friends. Don't take it to heart. Let's talk it out. I know you've liked me since we were kids, but we're not a match. I've been blunt, I talk to friends like that. You get it? Maybe Kathy thought I'd fall apart. But I just nodded and said, I know. Long ago I stopped caring. But it's funny, with the stutter I couldn't quite explain myself confidently. I don't have those feelings, never did. I won't be your trouble. Kathy looked a bit complex, her movements paused. The air was silent for a bit. Then I asked, Betty, where is she? What for? I looked at Kathy like she was bizarre. Just to thank her for delivering the can? Kathy clicked her tongue. Betting. She'd throw it in the trash after taking it. Is that so? But I remember back when I'd bring food to school. Betty would often playfully ask, Hey desk buddy, gimme a bite of your canned stuff, would ya? I wavered a bit, not sure if her taste had changed. Carefully I asked, what does she like? Come on, Evan, she helped you casually, no need to bug her with thanks, that's annoying. Kathy concluded, this is how lack of socializing shows. I'll introduce you to new friends. Maybe it'll help that stutter. She dragged me to a fancy club. Inside the room, the music was trippy, the crowd lively. A refined-looking guy saw Kathy and warmly greeted, Kathy's here. After 2 glances my way, he looked past me and pouted. Didn't I tell you to bring Betty too? Where is she? Kathy casually raised a wine glass. Don't put me in a spot. She's a tough one. Always fooling people. I felt out of place here. This wasn't my idea of a hangout. That guy came over to chat, handing me a glass of orange drink. He grinned. Hey, I'm Charles. What's your major? I'm broadcasting hosting. He spoke fast. I tried to answer normally. I'm Evan, computer science. Charles burst out laughing. He clinked glasses with Kathy. First time I've seen someone talk like popping words out one at a time. Interesting. Kathy shot me a look. Born like this. No way I can fix it. The lights dazzled. The smell of smoke and alcohol made me uneasy. While taking a breather outside, I opened my phone, staring at the contacts list. Besides Mom and Kathy's names, was a number without a name. I looked quietly for a long time. Suddenly, my shoulder was tapped and I accidentally hit the call button. My phone was too old, the touchscreen wonky. I fumbled to hang up. It was Charles, tapping my back, looking down with pity and amusement. Kathy said to show you a good time. Geez, Charles let me in on his unspoken message. I was never going to fit into their circle. I once asked Betty what city students with money were like. She yawned lazily, pointing to herself. Like me. All a bit non-mainstream? I tilted my head, honestly asking. Red-haired, earring-adorned Betty chuckled, squeezing my cheek, laughing boldly. Just jerks. Charles's scent wafted. Loud music and cheers pierced my eardrums. Suddenly, I missed my hometown's pear blossoms. Missed Betty's faint scent on her collar. Charles lit a cigarette. I'm down to talk. I'm a retake student like you. I was in Kathy's high school class. You came to be university for her. I'm here for someone else. He exhaled a plume of smoke, marveling, seemed beautiful, but not so cocky. I guessed who. I silently listened. Kathy asked me about what kind of girls she's into, and she said she only likes the ones who aren't into her. Charles scoffed. Don't you think that person has issues? I nodded in agreement. He went on. But I have issues too, just like her. Charles glanced at Kathy as she walked towards us. His gaze loaded with meaning. The ones who chase me don't interest me. I want the ones who couldn't care less about me. Kathy casually took Charles's cigarette. I told you not to do that. Aren't you worried about wrecking your voice? She sounded helpless, but not as annoyed as when she made fun of my clothes. Charles joked, you really care about me. Huh? The girl, who was frowning just a moment ago, blushed. She liked him, but he liked someone else. So that's how it was. Before heading back to the room, Charles shot a glance my way. his lips curling like a smug cat. He whispered to me, "See? You're also into someone who doesn't like you back." Pitiful. Charles was a pretty confident guy. I figure it's because he never missed out on anything since he was a kid, and he couldn't stand losing what he thought was his. So even though he saw me as no threat, he still flaunted his territory like a king. Kathy was his. I thought it was a childish move, but I couldn't help wondering, if he knew I really wanted Betty, how would he react? Maybe he'd laugh at how foolish I am. My thoughts got interrupted by a ringing phone. Seeing the number, I hit answer without thinking, and my mind went blank. "Evan." I heard her tired voice. I let out a sort of aha. She chuckled, a soft sound like a cat's tail brushing over my heart. "Why'd you call earlier?" I stammered, "Wrong number." "Really?" "Why yeah, really." She went quiet, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat. After about half a minute of silence, I said, "So sorry for bothering you." As I was about to hang up, she suddenly said, "No bother." I paused. The midsummer night breeze brushed my neck. Her voice was lazy yet gentle. "Talk to me more. I want to hear." After the college entrance exams that year, Betty and I lost touch. Since seeing me almost lifeless in the hospital, my mom stayed close all the time. She loved me, so she hated anyone who hurt me. After she reported it to the police, she heard those thugs say they thought I was the school bully Betty's boyfriend and wanted to mess with me. Who'd blame them? She's so arrogant with her red hair, acting like she's all that. Yet she still lives in this lousy county, looking down on everyone else, dating a stutterer. It's laughable. I heard Betty had to be restrained by several people to stop her from beating up the thugs again. When my mom got back, she peeled apples by my hospital bed, saying nothing. Outside, Betty knocked on the door with a couple of boxes of vitamins, her rebellious hair and earrings looking much dimmer. In a careful tone, she said, "Auntie, I brought these for Evan." My mom interrupted. "I'd prefer if you didn't show up anymore. Please? I'm begging you," she said. A long, silent pause followed. I just remember the cicadas droning that day, every part of me aching deeply, and my mom's tears scalding my hands. An indescribable sadness sat heavy like a fog cloud in my chest. Stubborn, unyielding, unforgettable. During my repeat senior year, her picture stayed up on last year's honor board. I passed by it repeatedly, sometimes just staring. When the evening study bell rang, the last light in the sky lingered on her cold brow. I softly murmured, "B University. Betty. Long time no see." I had rehearsed those words endlessly, with no stutter, and also "thank you." But before I could say them, a tipsy girl bumped into me. "Let's meet." "I'm in Kathy's class. Don't be shy," she said, putting her hand on my shoulder. I abruptly shook her arm off, glaring coldly. The girl mumbled something about me having a bad temper before leaving. I returned the phone to my ear. I heard Betty ask leisurely, "Where are you?" "White Moon at a club. With your Kathy." I answered honestly, "Yeah." There was a 2-second pause on the other end before Betty hung up abruptly. I sat there dumbfounded. A moment later, she texted, "Gonna come steal the spotlight. Your sister won't mind, right?" When I got back, Kathy was just complaining to Charles. "Weird. This guy said he wasn't interested in coming. Now he's asking for the room number." Charles's eyes lit up, a smile he couldn't suppress. I texted Betty to come celebrate starting college with me. Didn't expect her to actually show up. Kathy froze. "Really?" Charles nudged her with his elbow. "Kathy, if I manage to win over Betty, I'll definitely remember you as the matchmaker." Kathy gave a small smile and didn't comment. She pulled out a lighter and tried to light a cigarette over and over with no luck. I grabbed a matchbox from the table and handed it to her. She looked up and met my eyes, slightly surprised. Unexpectedly, Kathy took the matchbox and held my hand. She sat next to me, speaking softly with a somewhat bitter smile. "Evan, good thing you're here." I was startled, quickly pulling my hand back. Just then, Betty pushed open the door. The room fell silent for a moment. Even the most buzzed folks sobered up a bit. Betty's hair was slightly tousled by the wind, making her features look more striking and sharp. Her gaze cut through the crowd and landed on me. My heart skipped a beat. Betty casually strolled over. With a half smile, she said, "What game you guys playing? Looks cozy." Someone in the room joked. Kathy and him weren't playing, just whispering to each other. The room erupted with playful jeers. This made Kathy glance quickly at Charles, who was laughing too. Then she shrugged it off. "You all go ahead and play. Don't mind me catching up with Evan." Hearing that, people laughed and let it go. But Betty raised an eyebrow. "How come you weren't so eager to catch up when we picked people up this afternoon?" Kathy was momentarily speechless. Betty sat beside me, casually grabbing a deck of cards from the table. Charles moved closer, smiling sweetly. "Betty, we'll be college buddies now. Looking forward to it." He was charming, his smile inviting warmth, and his conversation lively. He could liven any room. Even his jokes hit just the right note, making everyone feel involved. Besides Kathy, other girls present seemed interested. "We've already spotted this new broadcasting major hunk on campus. And I heard Star Media's already signed you? Is that the talent agency started by the national movie star Diana? That's impressive. Charles must be hanging out with celebrities all the time now." Charles laughed and shook his head. "Nah, not really. I've just started getting involved, and I've only met Diana and a few actors preparing for a new show. Their looks must be amazing, right?" A girl across from me sighed enviously. Charles glanced at Betty, who was still casually rolling dice, seemingly uninterested. "Of course, but I think Betty stands out even more." His eyes crinkled in a smile, and a faint blush spread across his fair face. Anyone could see who Charles had his eyes set on. Everyone exchanged knowing glances, while Kathy sipped on her drink, minding her own business. Only Betty seemed indifferent, leaning back on the couch as she turned to me. "What do you think? Do you think I'm pretty?" She was so close. Close enough for me to clearly see my baffled reflection in her deep black pupils. Everyone stared at me, that skin-crawling feeling reminiscent of Betty's first day at our high school. She had boldly asked at the podium, "Who's number one here?" And I had cluelessly raised my hand. The girl with the red hair had strutted over to me, tilting her head with a cheeky smile. "I only sit next to the best." Her carefree demeanor, disregarding others, hadn't changed a bit. I put down the watermelon slice I'd just bitten into and nodded awkwardly, agreeing with her. Betty's smile widened, while Charles's expression turned a bit odd. He looked down. When he glanced back up, the conversation had shifted away from Betty. He lifted his glass to me with a smile. "We've been talking a lot, but we haven't properly introduced you. I'd love to hear you talk. You look so sweet, and your voice is so nice." Malice. I felt Charles's malice instantly. He reminded me of those kids who bullied me in elementary school. "Teacher, Evan knows the answer to this question. Let him explain." I was young then, too naive to understand malice. But I remember standing at the blackboard, trying to explain, while everyone stifled their laughter. Even the teacher. After that, I refused to answer questions. I became aware of who was giving genuine encouragement and who just wanted to embarrass me. Charles looked at me with a grinning gaze, unknowingly pulling others along. "Yeah, come on, we're all here to make friends." Kathy said in my ear, "Charles is giving you a chance to shine. Just introduce yourself. Don't be so antisocial." Don't be antisocial, it's not likable. Now even Kathy was saying it. It was almost laughable to me. The first life lesson I learned was acceptance. Accepting my own flaws. "My name's Evan." I spoke calmly, though my pauses showed some effort. "That's it? Just a name?" Charles sighed. "Too little, Evan, at least share your hobbies or something." I looked at him. I refuse. The second life lesson. Firmly refuse when someone's request is offensive. Some people started whispering to each other. Kind of weird personality. Small-town narrow-mindedness, emotionally clueless. Though spoken quietly, I heard it, and so did the others at the table. Charles kept smiling, while Kathy stayed silent like the others. In the silence, I had a realization. Wow, you're all so annoying. I was surprised. I looked by my side at Betty, who voiced my thoughts out loud. The atmosphere grew even quieter, making Charles's smile freeze. Betty's glance swept over everyone, finally landing on the guy who'd mocked my narrow-mindedness. Though Betty wasn't wearing earrings or sporting that fearless red hair, she reminded me of her rebellious high school self, defying the world. Could anyone actually feel superior just because they were born in a city? The guy looked embarrassed. Betty, I was just joking around. Besides, he is emotionally clueless and stammers a lot. Probably something's wrong with his head. With a bang, a wine glass was slammed onto the table. What were your scores in the college entrance exam to judge his intelligence? Betty's eyes narrowed, and her lips curled sarcastically. The guy in front of you is the top-scoring newcomer this year, awarded a 100,000 yuan scholarship personally by the county mayor with full tuition waived for all 4 years at B University. She articulated each word clearly, as if slapping the guy with every sentence. And you? You were born into an affluent city life, enjoying top-notch resources from a young age, and even had lower college entrance requirements. Yet your parents still had to pay to get you into a high-cost special program at B University. Who's really got the problem here? Was the third life lesson Betty taught me. Hit where it hurts. In the gray county town, she was a splash of bright, unapologetic red. And in this city full of pretense, she was still the same. Thank goodness for that. That night, the party ended awkwardly. But I felt happy. Late at night, Kathy suddenly texted, "Why didn't you tell me you and Betty were desk mates? You used to tell me everything." I paused, a bit thrown off. Kathy seemed to have forgotten how she would brush off my trivial ramblings. I didn't understand why she was asking now. Me, what's up? Kathy replied quickly, "Don't get too close to her. You and she aren't from the same world. Her circle isn't for ordinary folks." That was it. Kathy moved on easily, asking if I'd like her to show me around B University's popular spots. "Your mom called me, asking to look out for you a bit more." I paused at the mention of mom. But after a brief silence, I turned her down. "No need to trouble you, I've got other things to do." She seemed puzzled. "What else do you have?" I checked my schedule and replied calmly. "The school notified me to prepare for a freshman representative speech this afternoon." She almost instantly replied, "You giving a speech? Seriously, you know your own situation, right? I suggest you let the school know sooner to swap someone else, or it'll just be awkward for everyone." Kathy naturally assumed I couldn't handle it, just like when she stayed silent during the criticism about me earlier. Annoying. Growing up, she and mom consoled me, telling me it was okay, even if I didn't talk much. Kathy would say it was okay to accept my flaws. They assumed I couldn't fight back, so they were sure I didn't have the guts to do it. That was until a loud redhead stormed into my boring life. She said, "I'm gonna beat you and become the new number one." She was immature, carefree, and a bit over the top, but she sparked an excitement in me that I'd never felt before. Later in the monthly exam, I proved my strength. She came second by just 1 point. I walked through the crowd checking the results, heading back to class. And there was Betty, hanging over the second floor railing, smiling down at me. "Did I do well or what?" "I almost caught up to you," she said. I held my head high, smiled back at her, and gave her a thumbs up. I said, "I'll wait for you. Challenge me again." The tree shadows swayed, and the sun was just right. I heard someone ask Betty, "Why's your face red? It's almost fall and it's not hot." She turned quickly, her ears slightly red too. She said it was because of my smug grin. I think that's when I learned something important. I've got to stand up for myself. The ceremony would be held in a month, and honestly, a month can't change much. Stammering is a muscle habit issue, with some self-esteem problems thrown in. But I remembered in the unnoticed corner of morning reading, my words flowed smoothly. I didn't need the speech to be groundbreaking. I just wanted it to go smoothly, just like reading normally. 2 days after signing up, I started hitting the park next to B University every afternoon at 5, after military training, to read my speech in an empty little pavilion. Betty was my only audience. I asked her to come. "Why not bring Kathy instead of me?" she asked, resting her chin on her hands, smiling across from me. "Why? Trust and friendship." She wouldn't laugh at my efforts. But I countered, "Do I annoy you?" She looked down. "I'm just afraid you'll only call me this one time." The first attempt didn't go well as expected. I bowed my head, silently marking problematic parts. Being down was inevitable. But then some epic music playing in my left ear pulled me back. Betty had put one earbud in, her fingers scrolling through her music list. She laughed, "Add some background music. It'll speed up your progress, believe it?" I suddenly remembered when she used to recite poems with headphones on, memorizing while listening to music. She learned super fast. I nodded, "I believe it." Her eyes reflected my image, her other hand gently patting my back. "Evan, I believe in you too." It felt like the most ordinary thing she could say, yet it made me want to cry. I held back my emotions, turning the speech to the first page and starting over. From dusk to starry night, she always applauded after I'd done. "Betty, you're not the troublemaker my mom thinks you are. Meeting you in high school is something I'll always be grateful for." On the 15th day, some chilly raindrops hit my face, and my first instinct was to text Betty. "It's raining." She didn't reply. I bought an umbrella at the supermarket by the dorm but saw a viral post on the campus wall just after paying. "Diana's secret child is attending B University." Scrolling down, there was Betty's photo. The comments section was going wild. "Holy crap. We only knew she was our school's beauty. We even said she was like a young Diana. Turns out they're actually related. Diana's just 40, and this secret daughter is already 20. Showbiz, man, always something." This post caught like wildfire, reaching the top of trending topics. And then, Betty's entire past got exposed. Her mom, Diana, while starting out as an extra, ended up living with someone. The year she got pregnant with Betty was when her first hit film, Chronicles of the Moon, aired. Diana had just become famous, had the money to raise a kid, and secretly gave birth. Betty was hidden away and raised until Diana announced her marriage, sending Betty off to a small town to finish high school. Netizens were all over this gossip. Diana's been saying she would never marry since she began her career. When she had that huge wedding, people were amazed that love could change her mind. But thinking back, it's kinda sad. Someone yelled, "There are so many reporters at the school gate." My heart sank. Holding my umbrella, I tried to squeeze through the crowd. There was Betty, surrounded by reporters in raincoats at the school gate, her face blank and her eyes cold. I heard someone asking her, "Did you know about your background? Can you tell us about your dad and Diana?" The rain, the camera clicks, the relentless questions all jumbled together. I felt like I was going mad. How must Betty feel at the center of it all? She lowered her head and took out her phone. "Are you trying to reach Diana?" Someone asked. "Could you answer our questions? Look at the camera." The rain poured harder, and my phone buzzed. I answered. Betty's slightly hoarse voice came over. She asked, "It's raining. Do you have an umbrella?" Through the rain and all the cameras around, her expression remained calm. The raindrops on her lashes made it look like a fog. I didn't have an umbrella and felt incredibly overwhelmed. She didn't lose it, but I felt suffocated. I gritted my teeth, pushing to the front, shoving a paparazzo out of the way. Betty was still holding her phone to her ear. She stared at me, surprised. I shook a little as I held the umbrella for her. I said, "Come with me." I grabbed her hand, pulling her into the campus. Some paparazzi wouldn't quit, and I didn't hesitate to kick at their knees. Just like she had once carried me unwaveringly towards the hospital under the stars. I held her firmly, leading us away from the loud, chaotic crowd. Online rumors still swirled, and the campus walls discussions stayed heated. But Betty didn't check any of it, just smiled at me in the infirmary. I had overestimated my combat abilities, embarrassingly passing out because of low blood sugar while kicking those guys. But it did scare them off, afraid I'd hold them accountable if something happened to me. So they quickly dispersed. The school nurse fed me 2 chocolates, and within 10 minutes, my dizziness was gone. When I opened my eyes, I saw Betty leaning on the bed, her face in her hands, smiling at me. Her eyes shone like they were full of stars. She said, "Evan, you were so cool just now. You made my heart skip a beat." I felt a bit embarrassed, even when I fainted. "Yeah," she replied slowly. It was like I went from an irregular heartbeat to cardiac arrest. Her words made me laugh. The rain had stopped, but her gaze never wavered. She called my name again. Evan. I looked up, a bit puzzled. In a soft voice, she said, "Just now you held my hand." A gentle breeze blew, and the soft light outside fell on her hair. I couldn't meet her eyes. Her slender fingers opened, cautiously suggesting, honestly asking, "From now on, can we hold hands every day?" Diana finally released a statement at midnight, acknowledging Betty's existence and warning paparazzi to stop invading normal lives. Even more shocking, after announcing her divorce, Diana had returned to her hometown, and Betty took a week's leave following that. In the days she was gone, I found out that Charles's roommate had posted on the campus wall. She claimed Charles mentioned it in passing. In passing? I didn't believe it. On the 20th day, Charles appeared on my way back to the dorm with a smile on his face. He stopped me. "Kathy says you still insist on giving speeches. You're really determined. Want me to teach you how to talk, stutter bug?" Seeing that I ignored him, Charles chuckled. "You know, even if you were the first to get a chance to speak, you'd mess it up with your stutter. No matter how hard you try, you'll never get what we get so effortlessly." I stopped. "You all?" He raised an eyebrow. "Don't get it? You should know well. You've studied hard for years to get a $100,000 scholarship, and my dad could just hand me a watch worth the same. Kathy got more than $100,000 worth of gifts for her 18th birthday. That's the difference between you and us. Of course, Betty will be one of us too." Charles leaned in, saying each word slowly. "She will reconcile with her mom, inherit the family business. She's one of us already. I helped her come around." He looked quite smug. "Dude, you're the busiest body I've ever met." Seriously eye-opening. A cold female voice broke in. Charles froze. I pulled out my phone from my pocket. Just as he arrived, Betty and I were on a video call. She spoke irritably in the call. "Evan, can you give him a smack for me? I'm gonna lose it." Betty absolutely despises Diana. She says the grass on her dad's grave is 2 meters tall, and only now this woman acts all emotional. It makes her sick. Charles hit Betty's weak spot with precision. Charles desperately tried to explain. "It wasn't me who posted it. I just accidentally told my roommate." At that moment, I obediently listened to Betty and gave Charles a big slap, then turned and ran. Betty was stunned that I really did it. She was dumbfounded for a bit, just letting out a surprised wow. That was loud. "Did your hand hurt?" Finally, she mumbled to herself, "I gotta get back to school soon." She worried someone would retaliate against me but couldn't get a timely flight, so she hired a long-distance taxi rushing back to Big University from her hometown. Halfway through, she also told me that Diana found out it was Charles who spread the info and decided not to sign him. While waiting for Betty to return, Kathy showed up in front of me first. In the dining hall, she sat next to me with a wanting to say something look. I could guess she wanted me to apologize to Charles. After all, I hit the guy she liked. I didn't expect she just hesitantly asked, "Did you and Betty start dating?" I said no. She visibly relaxed. "I knew you two wouldn't work." I paused and added, "But soon." Kathy froze. She poked at her plate, not eating. She asked how long I've liked her. For a long time. I didn't want to elaborate to Kathy. "So you got into Big University for her?" "Yes. And also because the U offered me a tuition waiver." Kathy let out a light laugh, laced with unexplainable bitterness. "You've changed a lot. We've known each other for," she calculated, 11 years, right? "In my memory, you were so obedient when you called me sis. Like I was your guide. One wave and you'd be beside me. Later in high school, someone saw you texting me. They said you had a crush on me. They laughed and called you a simp. I felt really uncomfortable." So she distanced herself from me. "When I was young, I linked that discomfort to you being annoying, dull, so I disliked you. Liking me felt like a bizarre shame to me, actually." Her eyes trembled slightly. "I hated being from the same lower-class background as you. Hated those peers who had seen the world since childhood mocking me for being tasteless like a nouveau riche. I worked hard to strip away my past, to socialize, to fit into their circles. I finally blended in, but going to college introduced me to someone who shattered my understanding. It seemed Kathy wanted to air all she had buried in her heart over the years. She said, I was really jealous of Betty. She just stood there, doing nothing, saying nothing, and people gathered trying to be friends. And she could nonchalantly yawn and walk away. The guy I liked had a crush on her at first sight, saying she was more appealing than me. Betty was indeed captivating because she excelled at being herself. Kathy said that at the welcoming party, seeing Charles chasing after Betty, she suddenly felt it was pointless. She said watching me sitting quietly reminded her of her younger self new to the big city. And she held my hand, hoping to be my guide again. Why don't we go back home together in a few days? I missed those pear blossoms and Auntie's cooking. I listened quietly. She watched me with hopeful eyes. I didn't answer, just lowered my head, showing her the scar behind my ear. That day I was slammed against the wall. A metal piece on it sliced my earlobe. Only a small strip of skin kept it attached. Just that bit saved part of my ear from falling. I had a concussion, barely bundled with bandages. Taking the exam but fainted, had to be carried out. That's why I had to repeat the year. I slowly explained to Kathy. Not because I was indecisive, not because I didn't understand myself. Kathy was speechless. I didn't know. But just like she said, I've changed a lot. I no longer admire Kathy. I see her cowardice now, a trait I despise. Finishing the last bite of my meal, I glanced at the message. Betty saying she took a 2-day, 1-night taxi ride. Feeling slightly like dying. Leaving the cafeteria to meet Betty, I cheerily told Kathy that Charles might actually like her. He had quite a possessive interest in her. She didn't reply. If I could, I'd let these two spoiled brats torment each other. They don't know respect, don't know how to love. Pitiable. On the 29th day, Betty dyed her hair a bold red again. Beautiful and eye-catching. When you give your speech the day after tomorrow, all eyes will be on you. You might be too nervous to speak. She pointed at herself. I assure you, you'll spot me immediately. Just focus on me at that time. Think about how this speech is no different from your numerous practices. That'll ease your nerves. I nodded. Okay. Tree shadows wavered in the breeze. My face flushed red. She cupped my face, preventing me from dodging her intense gaze. Her hands were dry and a bit cool, soothing on my skin, yet still, I felt the small, uneven cigarette burn on her right palm. A scar left protecting me. I reached out with both hands, gently wrapping around her waist. The seemingly carefree person tensed completely, freezing in place. I looked up at her with the most sincere gaze. Thank you. Now it wasn't just me blushing. On the 30th day, my mom suddenly told me she'd visit in a few days. I wasn't too stirred, but Betty panicked, clutching her head. Maybe I should dye my hair back to black. That way, Auntie might not feel like smacking me. I reassured her, don't worry. Over these 30 days, I kept track of how Betty encouraged and helped me every day. I took lots of pictures of the B University snacks she brought me. Then I sent them to my mom. My mom still thinks Betty has something to do with the bullying I faced. But she can see how kind Betty is to me. It's like prejudice and logic are coexisting. On the 21st day, my mom told me, as long as you're okay, that's what matters. I don't hate her. I just can't forgive myself. Back when I was in the hospital, she'd always talk about if you hadn't met that strange girl. If I hadn't stayed longer selling that day before picking you up. If your dad was still here. She'd smooth down my bangs, her eyes always full of tears. You wouldn't have had to suffer so much. From being young and naive to mature and curious, if gratitude is the theme of growing up, there are two people I'm most thankful for. My mom, who raised and loved me, and I glanced over at the crowd below. There were so many people, but I wasn't scared. And her, who taught me confidence and resilience, not to fear ridicule or go with the flow. I looked down and over to the right front row at Betty. She's really dazzling. The sun has a special fondness for her. So do I. During this grand and solemn ceremony, I didn't worry about messing up or stuttering. But right up until I bowed and left the stage, I kept wondering. The microphone was so close to my heart. Could everyone hear it pounding so hard? Could they hear my bold and proud laughter? After the ceremony, when I came out from backstage, I was holding a bouquet of white roses. People leaving the venue were all looking at me. Some even stopped to watch. I felt like everyone thought I was about to propose. I paused, walking a bit awkwardly. That person smiled at me from afar. It gave me more confidence, but then someone blocked my line of sight. Kathy stepped forward slightly, her eyes blinking with light. She said, "Evan, you were amazing up there. I didn't expect to mean that much to you." I looked past her and calmly called to the person behind her, "Betty." Betty answered, grinning wildly. She raised a hand to pat the startled Kathy. "Step aside, you're blocking the view of my brother bringing me flowers." Betty said, hearing me call her softly as Betty in front of others was thrilling, and she was so jealous of the past Kathy. Later, she took great care of the white roses in our dorm, telling everyone, "How did you know these were a gift from the freshman representative?" Evan, Betty's carefree attitude towards everything is something I could never match. Oh well, no matter how exasperating she is, I still like her.